From the outbreak of the Troubles in 1969, Irish Americans were involved at all levels in promoting the Irish Republican cause, whether it was through charitable means, publicity, legal aid, or clandestine material support. One Irish American who wanted to make a greater contribution to the cause was John Crawley. John was raised in Chicago until he was 14 years old, when his family moved back to Ireland. At 17, he returned to the U.S. and enlisted in the Marine Corps, with the goal of receiving the most intensive military training possible, so that he could return to Ireland, join the IRA, and fight on the front lines against British imperialism. By the end of the 1970s, British police in the North had recovered over 3,000 weapons of American origin. In response, the FBI cracked down and brought an end to 2 gun-running operations successively in 1981 and 82. In early 1983, John Crawley is contacted for a meeting with IRA leader Martin McGuinness. And if you want to take it from there, John.
Yeah, well, I was contacted for a meeting. I was asked, to go to the United States to try and set up a new arms network. And I was a bit taken aback by that because I'd been an instructor at the Marine Amphibious Reconnaissance School at Little Creek, Virginia. And Martin had specifically said that they were going to send me because I had an American accent. And I was a bit taken aback that, the only real asset that they felt that I had was my accent. I felt that I had knowledge resources that would have been a lot more important to the IRA to be used properly. There were plenty of people in America with American accents that could, go into gun stores and, buy weapons. And for everything that we needed to get, I could have wrote it on the back of an envelope. So, I wasn't very keen, but, I was told to go. So I went. When I got to America, I had a $5 note that was torn in an erratic manner. I was told my contact in Boston had the other half of this note. So when I met them, they were Irish, and I explained to them that I wanted to set up this network, and I would need false driver's licenses to buy weapons and various other resources. So eventually and gradually, I ended up meeting Jim Whitey Bulger. Now, the people that I met, the Irish people that I met, were completely above board. That they didn't have a criminal bone in their body, but because we were doing stuff that was against the law, there had to be people involved who would break the law, and Jim Bulger was obviously somebody willing to do that and provide us those resources. So there's a saying that needs must when the devil drives, so that's sort of what we had to do. I know in the context of later years, with all the books and the movies about him, there's so much known about this guy that we didn't know at the time. We knew he was involved in some sort of criminal activity, but we didn't know the nefarious activities, that he was involved in that later became, public knowledge. At the time there was no internet, there was no Facebook. We had no way to check out or, we had no way to, to review who we were dealing with. We just had to go on recommendations, and basically all I could do was base anything on what I saw with my own eyes or heard. So anyway, we eventually were able to put weapons together. There were some over there that had already been stored from previous purchases. So we were building quite a bit of an arsenal, and we hope to get it up to quite a large level. And then I got a message from Ireland to come home now, bring everything, and you be on the boat. It was a very unusual message to get because there was no need for me to be on the boat. I mean, I knew all the contacts. I had all the contacts and everything in the States. I mean, I was never supposed to be on the boat originally. That was never part of the plan. I wasn't afraid to be on it, but there was absolutely no need for me to be on it. But I followed orders, and we
Sorry, John, can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
This whole arsenal you're building up, I just want to add that at the time you were also standardizing the weapons. Even though you hadn't received instructions on what to get, you were focusing on getting all the similar types of the same weapons. That way ammunition would be interchangeable, magazines would be interchangeable, and you're amassing quite a haul of stuff. Can I ask, it ended up being about 7 tons of weapons. How do you guys store this stuff? Was it all over Boston, over the United States?
Well, I mean, there was stuff in Philadelphia, in New York, in Boston, New England area, in different private houses and that of sympathizers, things like that, people's garages and things like that. Yeah, I was trying to standardize a bit because you had a situation when I first joined the IRA. I was very amazed to find out that you could have maybe 8 men in an IRA operation. Every man had a different rifle. Every rifle a different caliber. So it was a training and logistical nightmare. So I wanted to standardize as much as possible, which obviously would have helped in training for one thing. Another thing that I found in the IRA that really surprised me was you could be trained on a weapon on a training camp and then never see that weapon again and use a completely different weapon on an operation. So a lot of it didn't really make a lot of sense, and there was no need for it. It was as easy to do it the right way as the wrong way. For example, I mean, I was never in an American gun store, and this is now over 40 years ago, that didn't sell an AR-15 rifle. So, I mean, it was just as easy to do it the right way as the wrong way, but there didn't seem to be that emphasis from a core leadership in the IRA. It was just about getting the quantity of stuff. I mean, the quality didn't seem to come into it at all. Which kind of mystified me at the time. But, so, yeah, that was the situation. I mean, and then...
so your plans had to change when you heard about having to come over straight away?
Yeah, well, my plans... See, we were planning a much bigger shipment, and we had bought a much bigger boat, like a freighter. And then the long-term plan was to get a cargo or some goods that we could ship to Europe and have a reason for traveling and fund the operation. And maybe 3 times a year, the shipment would meet an Irish fishing trawler off the coast of Ireland and drop off weapons, you know, if we had a trusted crew on board. That was the plan. I mean, the operation that we did, just going straight over and meeting a boat, it was very crude. Definitely lacking finesse, but that's what I was told to do. Bob Anderson, the captain of the boat, the Valhalla on the American end, had coordinates of where to meet an Irish fishing trawler. So we went to those coordinates in the North Atlantic, about 200 miles off the Irish coast. It would have been, today's the 28th September when I'm talking to you, so it would have actually been 40 years ago today that we met up. And we were at the coordinates. I didn't know what boat was coming out to meet me. I didn't know the name of the Irish boat. I didn't know anybody who would be on the boat. I mean, I had no knowledge whatsoever. But we transferred the weapons, and then I transferred myself to the Irish boat. And then when we were coming in, I asked one of the fishermen on the Irish boat where we were going to land in Ireland, and he says, "You'll see when we get there." So I had absolutely no idea where we were going. I mean, we could have been going to Donegal, Mayo, Galway, anywhere.
Sorry, John. Do you mind if I just jump in there, if we could back
Yeah,
up?
sure.
Tell us a little bit about the voyage of the Valhalla, as far as you guys were actually traveling because of the change in direction of your mission. You had to travel at the height of hurricane season. And
yeah, well, I didn't know it was hurricane season, but John McIntyre was later murdered by Whitey Bulger. He mentioned it, you know. So obviously, I was hoping that, you know, we wouldn't run into anything, but we actually did. We actually hit the tail end of a hurricane about halfway over. And I'd been at sea a good bit in the Pacific and all in the Marines. I'd been on troop ships and that, so I'd been on the open ocean. But never in my life did I see the ocean so smooth. It was like glass. I mean, it was the calmest water I ever saw, even on a fishing pond. Just calm, dead calm. And I remember the Captain Anderson telling me that was the proverbial calm before the storm, because he was monitoring this hurricane coming up the Gulf Stream from the Bahamas. So I thought, that's all I need to hear. And anyway, it hit us, and we had a nightmare night or two of it while we battled the storm and tried to keep the boat from sinking. At one point, a wave hit the Valhalla, put in 4 of the tempered glass windows that was specially strengthened for the sea, put in 4 of the 7 windows. Thankfully, Captain Anderson was on the wheel when it happened. He was able to steer us out of a very dangerous situation. But water went down.
As if gun running isn't dangerous enough.
As if it's not dangerous enough, water went down and to where the guns were stored, caused a short circuit. There was a fire. So I stumbled out of my cabin to a site Bob Anderson is on his knees. He's bleeding like a stuck pig from a head wound from the broken glass. The windows are gone. Smoke's billowing up from where the guns were stored. So, I mean, obviously, I came to the conclusion most people would come to we're dead. So I said to Captain Anderson, should we put on survival suits we had? And he nearly laughed at me. He said, we have no communications. Nobody knows we're here. He says, put it on if you want to, but it's only going to take you 8 hours longer to die. So none of us put them on. When on the military principle that 2 is 1 and 1 is none, we had doubled up on everything. We had 2 at the time. There was no GPS at the time. What they called Iran navigation systems. We had 2, and we had 2 VHF, I think, radios. But all our electronics were knocked out by the waves, by the water coming into the pilot house. So we were essentially blind and communicationless. Now, after 2 or 3 days of chugging along, 1 Loran navigation system came back on and 1 radio came back on. And we were able to continue our journey and meet the Marita Ann. And also John McIntyre, who was on the boat, did sterling work putting up plywood and, over the portholes that were broken. And more or less, doing damage repair to the boat. I wasn't a fisherman. I mean, I had no idea what to do. Like, I was dead weight in the boat. I mean, I was like I might as well have been a sandbag for all the use I was, to be honest.
Yeah. So then your journey continued after you made it through that struggle, and you didn't know there was more struggles lying ahead as you met up with the Marita Ann.
Yeah, we met up with the Marita Ann. We had a tough time transferring the weapons. There was a small boat or pond on the Marita Ann. So John McIntyre did sterling work that night, making many, many, many trips across with the weapons in a 4.6 gale. And so eventually I boarded the Valhalla. I transferred from the Valhalla to the Marita Ann, and we went on our way. And like I said, I didn't know where in Ireland we were going. I didn't know anybody in the Marita Ann. I'd never met any of them. And so I had been 2 weeks at sea through a storm. I was absolutely and utterly exhausted. I went to sleep in a crew cabin, and about midnight that night, 40 years ago today, I was shaken awake and said we were being boarded by the Irish Navy. The Irish Navy were waiting behind the Skellig Rocks. Apparently, I found out later we were going to Kenmare Bay, and the Irish Navy was waiting behind the Skellig Rocks. They're very famous rocks off the coast of Kerry, and they were waiting there. Well, first of all, they knew we were going to be going to Kenmare Bay, and they were also the Skellig Rocks performed the function of the boat radar couldn't pick up the Irish Navy ships behind those rocks. Later on, so we were arrested at sea. Later on, when I was being questioned about Jim Lynott was the area intelligence officer. He was later killed at Loughgall with 7 other volunteers at Loughgall in County Armagh in 1987. He was shot dead there, but I knew Jim previously, so Jim was the first man into my cell when I got to Portlaoise prison, and he was the area intelligence officer, and he was getting messages from the outside to find out, how we were arrested. And the messages coming from the outside were sort of implying that the fault was mine because I trusted the wrong person in America or something like that. But I remember thinking, hold on here a minute. Neither me and nobody on the American end knew we were passing the Skellig Rocks and going to Kenmare Bay. But the Irish Navy knew, and I know I didn't tell them. So it turned out later that the informer was Sean O'Callaghan, who was second in command of the Irish Southern Command. He had been working for the British intelligence agency, MI5, and for the Garda Special Branch for many years. And he informed on us. But one thing that isn't often talked about or mentioned is Sean O'Callaghan wasn't the one who told me to come now, bring everything, and you be on the boat. So I believe there was an even higher informer who set us up. I can't prove it, but I strongly, strongly believe it. It made no sense. First of all, we were planning a much bigger operation. The stuff on the Marita Ann would have made no difference. Had it got in, it would have made no difference whatsoever to the IRA campaign. It wasn't anything of strategic importance. It it was nice would have been nice to have, but it would have made no difference to our strategic ability to resist the British occupation, none whatsoever. I had no reason to be on the boat, yet I was told, bring everything, you be on the boat. And we were then arrested. So
betrayed by higher elements.
I believe so. Yeah. I believe so. Either somebody was very wrong or very stupid.
Yeah. And the real kick in the teeth when I was reading this was, first of all, how the Irish Navy treated you guys as they boarded the boat. And
yeah, they were very rough. Yeah, some of them were very rough, yeah.
And then the gall of them to the next day, so they had arrested people that were gun running to liberate 6 counties in Ireland. Then the next day, the same people in the Irish Navy were involved in commemorating Roger Casement, who was gun running in 1916.
Yeah, after giving us giving us a hard time on the boat, and I got banged up, with a rifle butt in the back of my neck and different things like that. And they were cheering that they arrested us. When it came on the news that their ship was mentioned in our arrest, that their cheers shook the ship. They were thrilled with themselves. And I remember thinking, that the British were bringing tons of weapons into Ireland on a daily basis to maintain partition of our country and to arm loyalist death squads. And those sailors wouldn't have given that a second thought, much less have done anything about it. But arresting us, they saw it as a glorious triumph. And yes, the complete irony that the next day at Ballyhaig, of a statue of the gun runner Roger Casement was unveiled, and the Irish Navy, of all people, were the Guard of Honour. So they arrested us one day, and the next day were the Guard of Honour for a man who was bringing weapons to the same place we were bringing them to fight the same enemy in pursuit of the same political objective. So it just flags up a little bit how
terrible
really
irony
be in Ireland. Yeah.
Well,
and the hypocrisy of it all.
It's an incredible story. But this, first of all, thank you, John, for taking the time out to talk about this. But this is just one part of the story of the Yank, my life as a former U.S. Marine in the IRA. It's an incredible book. I'd also just like to shout out Pat Nee, who is heavily involved with you guys in assembling this whole armament. He also wrote a book where he recounts from his point of view the whole operation, A Criminal and an Irishman.
Right.
Two books definitely worth checking out to learn more about this chapter in Irish history. And so thank you very much for your time, John.
Thanks, James. Thank you very much for asking me on.